Hello everyone, it is Joe here from OmniPoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, I'm going to be going over the post-rotation staples. These are going to be the cards that you want to separate from the rotating cards and keep them around, available to you, and also give you a decent guide of what cards you might want to purchase if you're looking to continue to play the Pokemon trading card game in the F-on format. I've tried to have a look at pretty much everything from temporal forces at this point, so I can start to create a map of what I think the best decks are going to be. So I have some general staples that pretty much most decks would consider having cards for, as well as a breakdown of archetype-specific cards that you might require as well. So it should be a decent breakdown for everyone here. Let's start off with the consistency supporters, and there's a decent amount that we still actually have in the format. Professor's Research, the best dump and draw that we have, it sees us the most amount of cards. Iono, Judge, and Roxanne, all great disruption options to have in the game, so your opponent can't just set up and do whatever they want on their end. Chorus's Experiment, a huge supporter card for the Lost Engines of the world. Giratina's going to still be around, Lost Zone Bots could be around, Goodra could be around. There's a lot of reasons why Chorus is still going to be important, and let's face it, some of the archetypes have snuck Chorus in because seeing 5 and keeping 3 is still a decent payoff. Cynthia's Ambition can definitely be nice specifically for single prize decks. Arven, a fantastic supporter card, getting more and more versatile, especially with A-Specs coming out in Temporal Forces. This card is going to become much more of a staple, not just going to be Stage 2 decks looking to get Rare Candy Forest Seal Stone anymore. This is going to become a far more versatile card, really getting much stronger as the format develops. Miriam, it still can be a way that you can draw cards and recycle Pokemon back into the deck. Typically this is outclassed by item recovery and just use more powerful supporter cards, but I still think picking up a couple is on the safe side. Irida, there is still going to be some powerful water types. Palkia and Greninja are still in the format, so there could easily be Irida style packages going into certain archetypes. I do think this is a versatile one to pick up, and every now and then just the fact that we have Radiant Greninja, we have Manaphy, we have Lumineon, there are other decent water types in the format. Sometimes there's reason to want to squeeze in just one or two of the supporter here and there. Worker gets far less useful than it was in the previous formats because there's no longer Path to the Peak. That was kind of the main reason why Worker found its way into a number of decks, but it's still a decent card having the binder, and for decks that still like to amass hand sizes, it's still not the worst option to have available to you, while still offering some disruption, as there are still going to be Stadium Wars in this format, because there are certainly some archetypes that do rely on stadiums on their end. Professor Sada's Vitality, it's going to be more than just the Roaring Moon deck that can start using the supporter card. There's going to be some single prize ancient builds out there, as well as some pretty impressive multi-prize ancient decks that also are on the horizon. Gardenia's Vigor, this one's never really kicked on. It's not a lot of draw power, but it is still going to be an option, and there are more exciting grass types coming in Temporal Forces, so I did think it was still worth the mention and still worth picking up. And if we are building around this supporter, you still want to get 4 copies of this card. And then on to the utility supporters, Boss's Orders, you got to pick up your 4 copies. Serena is in the format, but we lose so many V Pokemon that I didn't even think it was worth mentioning in the slide, especially because there's a new Morty supporter coming out very soon, which can offer some discard synergy from hand, which means the sort of upside of Serena having that discard option as well as being a gusting supporter or a pseudo gust supporter if it's only targeting V Pokemon, of course. I feel like it's just not worth it. I think picking up Boss is just the best thing to go for. This is going to be in so many archetypes. Poppy can be a good way to move energy around. Thornton can be a way to switch your Pokemon around to get some burst attackers on the scene. We know there's some great acceleration that is sort of specific to either a certain type of Pokemon or whatnot, and Thornton can sort of fix that so you can get some really powerful attackers out of nowhere. We have lots of ways to pick up our Pokemon. Churro is the classic pick up anything but discard everything attached, whereas Sharon is limited to colorless Pokemon, but you get to pick up everything, and they also have to have damage on them to be able to get this effect off, whereas Penny allows you to pick up everything but is only 2 basic Pokemon. So they're all sort of fitting different themes and are all worth picking up because they can be the sort of best option for different archetypes. The reason why we're going for 4 copies of Penny is because it can be centered around a sort of controlling Snorlax deck that is currently in the format. Speaking of which, there's a ton of like disruption style supporters that you might want to keep an eye out for. The Silene Yelchir combo is still in the format. The one thing I will say though is that Silene could also be you know, going up in value, because if you are flipping coins and putting something like a Prime Catcher or another Ace Spec to the top of your deck and drawing back into that card, it could actually be immense value. So I'm low-key interested in if Silene works its way back into any archetypes. Giacomo is a great way to discard special energy. Giovanni can accelerate to your Pokemon whilst disrupting the opponent's active Pokemon. Erica's is still a great way to get Pokemon into the active position that you might want to trap. And Misfortune Sisters is another great way to target your opponent's deck and remove some resources from them. So if you are looking to play, certainly the Snorlax controlling archetype, but there could be other controlling archetypes in the future where these supporters are still going to be integral. Onto the key items then. We'll start off with the searching options. Lots of ball search cards in here, mostly at 4 counts because they're also important. Hisuian Heavy Ball is pretty much only ever going to be a one-off because this is going to help out with your prize card situation. And Featherball, there's not many good options right now for free retreaters, so I've only got it at the 2 counts, but this could change, you know, as new cards develop and whatnot. There could be reason to have like the Featherball just adding to your overall ball search count. Capturing Aroma, we are lacking a bit of evolution search in the format right now, so this is going to be still possibly a decent card in the format. And Rare Candy, because there are many viable stage 2s currently in the game. Techno Radar, a card that wasn't all that good when VIP was out, but now is going to be like the trump card of future decks, and it looks like there could be a couple of different ways to play future toolboxes, so it's going to become a really important staple. The pivoting cards, Switch Car and Switch, both really important. Obviously, there'll be situations where you're playing an all-basic deck and the Switch Car is just naturally better than Switch, but there'll be times where you play a mixture of evolving Pokemon and basics where the Switch is just the better option. And then there's going to be a ton of energy, like recursion and manipulation style effects here. Energy Switch, Energy Search are pretty much always in format and always good cards to have around. Earthen Vessel being the upgrade to E-Search, in most situations, but does require some discard synergy, so every now and then there's reason to just play Energy Search. Most of the time, though, Vessel is going to be the stronger choice. Energy Sticker can be acceleration, and certainly things like Miraidon, some aggressive style archetypes, might want to look to have this card included. Energy Lotto can be a nice bailout style card if you are weaving in some special energy into your deck list here and there. Energy Retrieval and Superior, these can be good for Chempow, they can be good for Goldengo, and even possibly things like Meowscarada getting a better look in now that part of the peak rotates. Super Odd, great for the Lost Zone decks, great for evolving decks. This is just a staple in a number of archetypes right now in the game. We have some like turbo item cards, I guess you could say. Pokegear and Palpad helping you make sure that you have your best supporters around on the turns that you need to hit them. Trekking Shoes, just that decent cycle through the deck. Gutsy Pickaxe, yes, it is specific to fighting type energy, but this could go in any deck in theory to reduce your deck down to less cards effectively, because this is just a simple draw 1 as long as you have a bench Pokemon to be able to activate the effect of Pickaxe. We have a lot of decent disruption and utility style trainers as well in the game. Pokemon Catcher has been linked with some like Sada builds because you're most likely going to be playing Pokestop, so this can be a great way to get acceleration from a supporter card whilst also having Gust available to you. Counter Catcher, great for the stage 2 decks, great for Giratina, and a few other archetypes have certainly taken note of this. The reason why I say 4 copies is for that Snorlax archetype. If you're not looking to play the block Snorlax deck, I think probably 2 copies is going to be fine for you. Crushing Hammer for some disruption of energy again. This could be good for the new Great Tusk archetype, which can't really afford to use disruption supporter cards because it has to use ancient supporters. But if you want to have some item disruption, Crushing Hammer could be coming back into the format in that small way. Lost Vacuum, a great way to get rid of tools. It's less valuable now because there, again, is much less need to bounce stadiums from the opponent now that part of the peak is gone, but I still think tools and stadiums are going to be enough in the game to be worthwhile. Also because we have things like Arven, just having that tutorable option to bounce a tool every now and then is going to still be pretty solid, and it still ramps the Lost Zone for those engines. And the Cancelling Clone, we still have Greninja in format, there's a few other snipers around, so there can be reasons to have Cancelling Clone, and it can be a way through block as well if you really need it to be, so every now and then this is still going to pitch in and be a decent option. Onto the stadiums then, we have a ton of good stadiums right now in the format, Pokestop being a fantastic one, where you are able to cycle through the deck very aggressively if you want to have like discard energy synergies. If you want to have a ton of item density in your deck list, this can be absolutely massive. Townstall, we still have Forest Hill Stone, so it's still going to be a massive card, and we get even more versatility from Temporal Forces actually, where we're getting a -1 retreating tool, so this gets even more diverse and useful for a number of archetypes. Artisan, still a great way to just get more Pokemon into play. Cycling Road, not as that strong of an effect, but is you know, every now and then a bit of extra draw. Magma Basin could be good still for like Radiant Charizard situations, possibly even Incineroar as well, Entei variants, and there's even a new Gouging Fire EX that's going to be looking towards this card. Mesagoza, if you want to play Lugia, I think the effect isn't that strong of a card, to be honest with you, but it has found play in the past. League HQ and Calamitous Wasteland, kind of like techie disruption style stadium cards. Lost City can cause headaches to certain single prize archetypes or decks that want to have thin lines of Pokemon. Collat Stadium can be a great way to fix your prize map or effectively heal some Pokemon that have received damage. Temple of Sinnoh seems like a pretty solid card. I actually think it's very likely that Giratina will go back towards the stadium. It's obviously recently played Path of the Peak, but there is a Mist Energy coming out in the new set that would block your V-Star power, so having Temple to get rid of Mist Energy may once again become mandatory, because there are actually a decent number of archetypes that could be tanking thanks to that Mist Energy in part, but also just because Path of the Peak is gone, there are some potentially tanky EXs and V-Star Pokemon that we could look towards. So a Temple of Sinnoh denying this option and still allowing you to use the likes of a Giratina or Roaring Moon to still one-hit KO could be pretty handy. And Beach Court, we've seen this in the past. This is just great for like pivoting cards, still decent for Lost Zone engines here and there. So yeah, still just a great stadium card to have as a utility option. Similar for tools, really. There's actually a lot of diverse tools in our format right now, a lot of powerful ones as well. Technical Machine Evolution to ramp your own Pokemon is handy. Technical Machine Devolution can punish some rare candy-based engines and can be great for decks that love to spread damage across the boards. And there are still going to be some, even though the Rapid Strike deck is rotating, there still are going to be ways to ping damage around the board. Future Booster Energy Capsule is not only going to be a great pivoting option for the likes of Iron Valiant, but that damage modification is finally going to be sort of realized as we start to see new future decks come into the fold, and I do think it could be as high as 4 copies going into those sorts of archetypes, because this tool is just so inherently powerful. Being Muscle Band and Floatstone in one card is still absolutely absurd. Vitality Band, Defiance Band, and also somewhat the Box of Disaster and the Vengeful Punch. These are damage modifying style tools which all could come in handy in different spots. Defiance Vest can be a way to just be a little bit tankier. Super Effective Glasses also kind of is like a damage mod style card as well that we've seen now and again in a couple of Lost Box builds. EXP Share, a great way to retain energy across your board. Lux Cape is a really huge hit point buff that certainly Gardevoir players could look towards, as well as some controlling archetypes. Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, not only going to be good for like Roaring Moon, but there's also new ancient archetypes coming out here and there. And there's also the possibility of now having like a poison package as like a damage modification, now that there is a new stadium coming out from Temporal Forces that can buff poison even more. There's a chance that Ancient Booster Energy Capsule, Brute Bonnet, plus that stadium card just becomes a package, possibly even Radiant Sneasler as well if you really want to. So yeah, that's a pretty good one. Bravery Charm, just another way to buff hit points for basic style decks. And then Forest Hill Stone, a really powerful effect on a tool card, allowing you to search your deck for any card. It does flip your V-Star marker. There are a lot of Vs going out of the format, but still just enough, I think, where we could still see like mini V-based engines in a number of decks in this format, so that we get that extra consistency from the Forest Hill Stone. We're a little bit light in terms of special energy, though. We have some decent colorless ones in the format. Double Turbo Energy still handy. Jet Energy still a fantastic one. Gift Energy, a great way to protect yourself around hand disruption as well. V-Guard Energy becoming less and less useful as more V Pokemon sort of fade into obscurity, but every now and then could still be a tech inclusion if need be. Therapeutic Energy, decent for Snorlax, possibly even decent for like a Wigglytuff archetype that we'll get onto later. Reversal Energy, again, getting less useful because Gardevoir is not going to be based on Shining Arcana so much anymore, but still a really powerful card inherently, so going to be a good one to hold on to for future. Same with Luminous Energy right now. There could be some use for this card in some future-based archetypes, because you're likely going to be playing a whole heap of different energy to make use of different type coverages and different situations where different attackers are going to pop up, so having just 1 or 2 copies possibly in that sort of deck just from the get-go could be pretty reasonable, and we've seen in the past that this card can pop up every now and then as a really decent option. Onto the support and tech Pokemon, there's a decent number of cards that you might just want to get like single copies of. Obviously the Radiants are limited to 1 copy, Radiant Greninja being the prominent one, definitely the all-star really, where it's providing draw power but also could be an attacking presence, and you know, with Mirage Gate and with Palkia V-Star, that certainly can be the case for a number of decks. Ditto actually becomes a much, much better card in the new rotation because of the new Buddy Poffin search option. It can get to under 70 hit point Pokemon out into play. So this could be a way that you can actually get an extra Pokemon on the field by transforming this little Ditto into something with higher than 70 hit points quite happily. So This is going to be really nice. Definitely going to go into Lost Engines, I would imagine, but also could find its way into other archetypes. I think like Temporal could also look towards this card. A handful of other things may do as well. So this is getting a huge buff in the set. Comfey, integral to the Lost Zone. I feel like it's also just a decent early game draw card, so I wanted to put it on the general support options, but Lost Zone has so many directions, it's also just a great card to pick up in general. Manaphy protecting your bench, Jirachi protecting from counters, Bundle, obviously a Pokemon searchable way of pushing your opponent's Pokemon out of the active. This might become more valuable now that Escape Rope is rotating, so this ability could be going up in value. A few other Radiants have found their chance every now and then. Radiant Alakazam moving counters around, Radiant Charizard just a hugely overstatted big basic attacker in the late game. Radiant Serena can offer some healing for possibly some tanking archetypes, which is interesting, and also can play around devolve strategies from certain opponents. We have a few really good consistency abilities on some of these basic V Pokemon and EX here. Luminion can tutor out supporter cards, Rotom can end your turn by drawing a few more so that you can sit on a decent hand size for turn 2, and is also integral to the Snorlax archetype. Pidgeot V can be a way to prevent yourself from decking out, but could also be a way to use Forest Seal Stone whilst not leaving a vulnerable 2-prize Pokemon on your board, because it can put itself back into the deck. Squawkabilly, a really good early game option for dump and draw. Mew EX providing a pivot with free retreat, a potential attacking threat if you have the right energy acceleration options, and also a way to top up on cards if you are getting low in the hand size or getting hit with Ionos towards the late game. Klefki can be this really annoying build around style basic where you're denying other engine Pokemon from their abilities, so can be a headache for certain decks. Minior, bit of a type coverage tech card. It can help out against Snorlax, but also Iron Hands, especially if you are putting the super effective glasses on it. Spiritomb, obviously Genesect is rotating, but this could be a disruptor still to Rotom, Luminion, and Pidgeot, so I still think that it could be a valid tech inclusion, especially if Snorlax continues to be powerful. You want to stifle their instant charge options. Hawlucha can be an extra way to put damage counters into play, which is never a bad thing. Diancie, similar to Klefki, it could just be a Pokemon that you want to have as a lead in your deck to protect some of your basics on the bench. Morwell can still be a trapping option in the game. And then we have a number of evolving Pokemon which could still be really handy for draw or other utility options here. Dodrio damages itself but draws a card every time and has a 1 energy attack which can do some decent damage. Liepard is a discard 1, draw 2, which is really solid on a stage 1 Pokemon. Leafeon V-Star offers grass type coverage if Charizard's still going to be available, but also offers a gusting V-Star power. Darkrai, I think, gets way better in this format actually, because it can recover item cards from your discard pile. Again, because we have some fantastic ace specs in the game, there could be a lease of life for Darkrai, not only going into Roaring Moon style decks, but just in general being a tech 1-1 line, because recovering and reusing an ace spec can just be so powerful. Palkia still a really dangerous attacking option, and we can still import that package into a whole heap of decks with Irida, Palkia, and Greninja, and suddenly you have a means of dealing multiple prize knockouts with a single prize Pokemon, which is never a bad thing. And because Palkia can power itself up, it's also a great option. Arceus V-Star still a great consistency card if you really want it. It's getting less and less glamorous as an attacking threat because we are losing so many Pokemon that you can power up with Trinity Nova and Charge, unfortunately, but it could still be a consistency mon at the end of the day. And then I think the sort of premium evolutions would be Bibarel. I also think picking up Squovert alongside this would be a little bit handy because they synergize so nicely together. Squovert puts your entire hand to the bottom and then you draw 1, and then Bibarel can fully top you up with that Industrious Incisors, a really great option. And then Pidgeot EX, it's already kind of the focal point of one of the best stage 2s in the game of Charizard, whereas this gives you a fantastic engine to cherry pick any card in your deck. This card gets way better because part of the peak rotates, so now there's far less disruption to this card. People are going to have to knock out this Pidgeot if they want to deny you quick searching any card you want every single turn. So it wouldn't surprise me if Pidgeot EX finds its way into all sorts of archetypes into the future. So before we get into the nitty gritty of archetype specifics, I did just want to give you a quick primer on the Temporal Forces introductions. This isn't an exhaustive list. This is just kind of the headlines, really. There is definitely a really good emerging future box that's going to use Miraidon for early game acceleration to possibly a heap of different EXs, as well as possibly Iron Valiant EX as well that we've seen in the past, and Iron Hands EX, which is obviously a very strong card. The Reboot Pod probably is the ace spec that this deck will choose to play because it's even more acceleration. Possibly combining this with like experience shares or combining it with energy switches could be a way to have all sorts of different attackers powered up turn by turn, which is absolutely phenomenal. Raging Bolt is a really promising high damage output output basic Pokemon, which is always something you have to keep your eye on, especially with Sarda's acceleration and the possibility of Sandy Shock's EX. It is possible to chain Climactic Descents if you really need to. There's a new Koraidon, which is a decent beat stick as a single prize mon that requires that fighting cost as well, so we'll probably go into the Raging Bolt deck. Roaring Moon, a new basic Pokemon that does more damage for each ancient card in your discard pile, so filling your deck with ancient mons and then just smashing with a single prize mon sounds pretty impressive. Great Tusk is that new milling style archetype. It forces you to play either Explorer's Guidance or Sada on your turn to get the full mill of 4, but that's a pretty powerful means of discard, and with Sada and Double Turbo Energy you can chain this Ground Collapse pretty happily, and there are some other controlling cards up here which can help it out as well. Gouging Fire, just a very highly statted Pokemon, 260 for 3 energy is a really good rate, I would say, especially because this could be churned out on the first turn with the help of Sada, E-Switch, Magma Base, and these sorts of combos that we've seen in the past. Could be very dangerous. Explorer's Guidance, it's a reprint of Hapu, so it's not the most powerful effect, but could find its way into the Great Tusk Roaring Moon archetypes as well, so definitely a shot there. Ancient Drum potentially could make it into some of these builds. I think possibly Roaring Moon and Great Tusk will look to have this card, but I think things like the Raging Bolt and the current Roaring Moon EX decks will still look to play something like Prime Catcher in their deck list, but it is a great way to draw a few more cards based on how many ancient Pokemon you have in play at the time. And then for more like general metagame shifts in terms of new inclusions from the format, A-Specs are fantastic cards. You're going to play one A-Spec in every deck, there's just no doubt about that. It's just deciphering which one is going to be best for your build. Prime Catcher being kind of the gold standard, and you need to have a really good excuse to not play this card. Like I said, the Awakening Drum could be for some specific archetypes, the Reboot Pod being specifically good for a future deck, but Prime Catcher is pretty much good in everything as well, so you always have to make the argument whether or not you want to play this card or have some compelling reason, some synergy around other A-Specs that go in ahead of this card. The Hero's Cape, for example, could be really good in tanking style archetypes, could also be good in Gardevoir as you self-damage more of your lower hit point Pokemon and give them this huge buff so that you can reach higher thresholds of damage. Maximum Belt is a 50 damage mod to EX Pokemon, which could be also fantastic. I think specifically for Charizard EX, this could be a real standout option. I think probably is stronger than Prime Catcher, knowing that you already have Counter Catcher available in that archetype. And then for other new cards coming out, Buddy Poffin is that early game search option for low hit point Pokemon. Mist Energy can protect you from Frenzied Gouging and from Giratina's V-Star power. Salvatore can be a way to ramp an evolution, but can't be anything with an ability, so it's quite limited in its uses, most likely going to be helpful for Benetti X to get earlier item lock. Cryptomaniac can put any 2 cards to the top of your deck. This has a lot of synergy with Pokestop, Radiant Greninja, and a ton of other drawing Pokemon like Curlier, Bibarel, Xatu. This is a really versatile supporter card that's going to make it into a handful of decks, I would imagine. Heavy Baton can be a way to spread lots of energy after an Iron Hands is KO'd, possibly even helpful for Tinglu as well if that's ever going to make a resurgence. Emergency Board, reducing the retreat cost of one of your Pokemon by 1, really helpful, going to be good in any deck playing Arven, but also could easily be justified in a number of Lost Zone engines. Eri is a great way to disrupt your opponent's hand by getting rid of 2 item cards, and could be vital for the Snorlax archetype to run your opponent out of switching cards. And the Hand Trimmer forces both to put their hand size down to 5. This could be really helpful for the Great Tusk deck, so your opponent can't just attach attack through you. You're still trying to make them play cards throughout the entire game, otherwise they're just going to lose them to a Hand Trimmer play, and could also find its way into Snorlax as well, and in general could end up being just this one-of again in Arven style packages. If you can tutor it out for the right time, you can certainly punish the likes of the Lost Zone engine, Gardevoir, and whatnot by making them discard down from large hand sizes as they go. With all that covered, we have what I think are probably going to be the stronger archetypes in the new F-On format. Charizard remains a really powerful card, and I think is still going to be one of the front runners in the format. Gardevoir, I think, is probably able to adapt with this combination of Screen Tail and Drifloon as single prize attacking options. I still feel like it still has some of the better draw with the Curlier Gallade engine, and is still one of the better comeback decks, I believe, in the format with the help of Counter Catcher and Iono. Miraidon still looking impressive. It does lose the Flaffy, of course, but can try and make up for it with that Heavy Baton, with Generator, with the XP share, with Energy Sticker. I still feel like it will be able to have enough ramp to retain attackers throughout the entire game. I'd pick up Iron Hands even if I wasn't looking to play Miraidon, because it can find its way into things like Chempao, Roaring Moon even. It can find its way into Lost Zone boxes as well. Very versatile card. I think 2 copies is certainly justified. Giratina and just general Lost Box stuff still looks pretty good. I'd say 3/3 Tina is still pretty reasonable. There is the Crisis Shot coming out from Paldean Fates, so that will be purchasable very soon. It's a tool card that can help you dish out 280 on Cram for 0 energy, which is a great combo. The Block Snorlax deck still looks to be a presence in the format, and these are cards cards that you'd want to pick up for that one. Temporal Baxcalibur might have a new lease of life with Path to the Peak rotating, similar for Goldengo really. These are cards that have really, really powerful abilities, so making sure that you're not locked out of them throughout the entire game is going to make sure that you just continue drawing through your deck quite nicely. And when they are combo decks like these, they're really going to appreciate not having to fit in a ton of stadium cards just to accommodate for that card, so getting space in both of these deck lists is going to be huge. Roaring Moon still looking pretty promising. I think Brute Bonnet is getting a little bit more versatile as well, with extra damage modification from poison now in the form of a stadium card. It could help out for the new Walking Wake archetype in particular as well, which is something to bear in mind. I also think Iron Valiant is getting more versatile, could be really good in the future box, as well as being decent in like a Xatu style deck, which might get stronger with the help of that Cryptomaniac. And also the Valiant Entei deck is still likely going to stick around because it still has that really good early game tempo, and Tachyon bits can still cash in on a number of evolving Pokemon, which will continue to be in the format. And then Sandy Shocks and Slitherwing, these two cards are for those believers of the Raging Bolt EX. They're really going to be great synergy cards in there, where the fighting energy is going to be integral to that ancient based build. Then we get to the more speculative stuff. Stay with me here, guys. If any of these archetypes have caught your eye in the past, I think they have a decent shot of still having a chance in this metagame. Meowscarada might finally be unlocked as a card in the format because Path is no longer an issue, and especially for a stage 2 deck that needs to recur energy every now and then, not having to worry about Path of the Peak is going to be a massive boon for the deck. Gaining spaces is phenomenal, and of course it is still going to be hitting that crucial weakness into Charizard. Goodra V-Star gains that miss energy and possibly even health buff tool, so that seems like a big win for the card. Even having the maximum belt could be massive to make Rolling Iron more dangerous of an attacking presence into these EXs to really improve on this low damage output of 200. Lugia V-Star seems quite weak in the format, but if ever we do get more special energy or decent attackers that we could be ramping, suddenly the Primal Turbo will be a selling point once again, and at least the deck doesn't have to compete with Path to the Peak anymore. Similar for Hisui and Zoroark, possibly Klefki gets a little bit stronger in this format without Escape Rope, and possibly your V-Star power gets more live because you don't have to worry about Path anymore, so the deck inherently doesn't lose too much, and some of your biggest headaches are leaving the format, which could be pretty handy. Banette EX gained a ton with the new potential poison package, as well as the fact that you could ramp the Everlasting Darkness turn 1 now with the use of that new Salvatore supporter. Dialga V-Star possibly could be a build around once again with the new Metang coming out from the new set, and still has one of the most dangerous V-Star powers that we've ever seen. Like I mentioned with Goodra, there's potential tanking EXs from Revavroom and Wigglytuff EX. Now that their abilities can't get shut down, they're actually going to be standing pretty tall, especially with the help of Miss Energy, possibly even the Hero's Cape in there as well. Could be much more dangerous. I also think the Maximum Belt could be great for these cards as well. 170 and 180 respectively are both really in need of a buff of damage. As we know, Gigas V-Star has really powerful stats and could be one of the only Pokemon remaining that we can pair with Arceus. Magnezone EX may get a buff from the Relicanths, where you can use Junk Hunt from your Magneton on a really tanky Pokemon. I feel like this one's going to be still lying in wait until we get more items that we can abuse with this combo. Kieran VMAX may also have a new lease of life because it can combine with the new Cryptomaniac supporter. Bit of an outside shot that Tinglu makes it back into the metagame just because we are really starving for ability lock in the format with Path leaving. It makes this ability much more needed to put other archetypes in check. You may have seen that there was an Incineroar EX and Torterra EX on the Temporal Forces slides. They have a chance of seeing some play. They are some tanky stage 2 Pokemon with some upside, and you can currently buy the optimal basics for those sorts of Pokemon. Notably, the Turtwig is going to be from the new set, so you only need to pick up these Grotle. And then we round things out with a couple other decent single prize decks that you can consider. We still have Lunarock, and there is that Scizor. There's even a new Scizor EX coming in Temporal Forces, so possibly a new reason to think about this kind of archetype, and the Free Retreat Scyther is your optimal pick there. So that just about rounds out what I think we're going to need to pick up for the F on block rotation. Which of these brand new archetypes do you think has the highest chance of seeing success? Which of your current favourites are going to retain their titles at the top? I'll hear your thoughts down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.